And welcome back. In this module, we are going to be talking about the secondary drop. So just to recap, we've created our introductory drum section, our first breakdown where we introduced this kind of pulsing pad chord sound. And then we created 32 bars worth of the basic groove. During that time, we introduced a couple of new elements, new layers, just to kind of ramp the energy up and keep things moving forward. We dropped in some conga hits, we took them out. We also brought in some of this kind of ambient vocal and reversed reverb here as a kind of leading sound that brought us into the next section, which in this case was a kind of a reduction of elements to make way for these chord stabs. So all these layers so far have been dovetailing really nicely. So at this point we're looking at a short second drop. We're probably thinking 8 bars, and I don't want this to be something that really stops the track. I want it to be the kind of drop where the energy continues. Maybe we subtract a whole bunch of sounds, including the kick drum, and just kind of flow into the next section. So I'm looking at ways that that we can achieve that, and I think that this pulsing pad chord that we dropped in the first intro is probably the way forward here. And I think what I'm going to do is take this boom kick and the regular kick, just drag them and drop those over so that that kind of moment is nicely punctuated when the kick drum drops out. And what we're looking at possibly doing here is keeping some of the rhythms going. So I'm going to try, we've got the pad chord riff in place already. I'm just going to try doing that with the straight loop. I quite like this dub chord swelling at the in the bottom end here, but as you can see from these increments of the reverb, it's a little bit too much, and it's really washing out this moment where the pads come in. So maybe what we could try doing here is just moving this back to the end of this section, so you get this kind of dub chord coming in. We're looking at just ways that we can blend these two sections of the track. So let's see how that works using this dub chord. The other thing that I've added here is to, just to pick up the second half of this phrase where the chord stabs were happening, is these vocal snippets. Now I'm thinking, in order to really blur them in with the more reverby sounds that we're kind of using in this track, I may actually add some of this concert hall reverb to the vocals so that they're slightly more receded into the mix, and possibly we could ramp that reverb up slightly as we go into this breakdown, again just to create that kind of organic flow into the 8-bar change that we've got. So let's just give that a listen. Okay, so with this dub chord, first and foremost, let's fade in the level. Let's double that across so it's running right to the end of this section, but with a view to fading it out. So what we're looking for is a kind of ramp. So the sound kind of comes in, washes over that that change where the drums kind of disappear, and then kind of fades out on the other side. So in order to do that, we also want to look at how this hall reverb sample is being automated. So let's just listen to that part on its own so we can hear exactly what we're doing. I like that, it's pretty smooth. However, it does contain a lot of bottom end information, and actually the dub chord is something that we haven't yet looked at in terms of its sonic qualities. So let's just pull up an instance of EQ8 and see, let's choose this section where it's playing at its loudest. And you can see this is massively loud in this bottom end area. So we're going to create a low cut filter. I'm going to get rid of some of that rumble. I think something like that is fine, around about 100 Hertz. The cool thing about that is you're still retaining the essence of that sound without some of this nonsense that's going on in the very bottom end. So I think what I'm going to do is just drop that on the other side of the auto filter. And as you can see, this auto filter is basically a high cut filter. So as we've been using it before, as it filters down, we'll be losing all of the top end out of the sound. We actually, I mean, we could automate this so we flick it, we change modes into a low cut filter, but instead of doing that, I'm just going to add another instance of the auto filter, and that will just give us a little bit more controllability. So what I'm thinking here is perhaps filtering out this bottom end here to start with. The other thing I'm going to do here before we go any further is just to make sure that we automate the device so it's actually turned off earlier in the track where we're not going to need it. Let's also turn it off after we've used it. That way, you know, we don't end up with sudden surprises where this has accidentally been left on and it's kind of cutting out all of the frequencies that we want to be hearing. So let's just try automating here. Click this plus button, and that gives us a clear channel here where we just see the automation to the frequency. And let's just try fading it in. So what we're doing is as you can see here, as we move through time, we're going to start with that curve around about there. As we move through, it's going to slowly drop down, and that's going to reveal that lovely bottom end of the sound. And then in the latter part of this breakdown, I think we're going to try just ramping it up so it kind of filters out of the mix. Now that sounds good in my head. Let's see how it actually sounds when we listen to it in the track. Okay, now the reason that we're not actually hearing a massive amount of change there is because we've got so much of this sound actually going to the concert hall reverb. So let's just try for a minute turning that off so we can actually hear what we're doing a little bit better. So that's pretty cool. I like that concert hall reverb as we kind of swell into that section, but as we move out, kind of like the idea of that just disappearing so it becomes drier again. Let's just give that a listen with the track. So I think we're going to keep in, that's sounding pretty good. I think we're going to keep that wide clap in place over the breakdown, but maybe just adding a ramp there of the concert hall reverb. Let's extend that reverse reverb to actually reach the end of that 8-bar phrase. Really liking that sound. It's almost like a kind of China crash cymbal. It's got very kind of metallic quality to it, rather than that stopping bang on the beat where, you know, the groove comes back in. What I've chosen to do is to ramp up some more of the concert reverb there, and what that does is it just really smooths over that edge. So you can see how all of these different layers, these different parts, these reverb tails, they're all starting to dovetail into something that's got a real kind of organic flow to it. And I know I say that a lot, but I think it's a really fundamental thing to have at the forefront of your mind when you're arranging. Now, these vocal samples, I just added those, and you may have noticed earlier on I put in some of the concert hall reverb at a pretty low level, but I think it's enough to help them really sit in the mix. Now, I've noticed that there's a couple of elements to this that I'm not quite so keen on, certainly rolling up to this breakdown, and particularly this Vox 3 here. I'm not sure if this final note is particularly helping, so let's just have a listen to the vocal snippets, particularly paying attention to as part of the track. And if you're kind of thinking about the phrasing there of the track and how the ear's being led into that breakdown, this doesn't really work for me. This particular note on the vocal suggests that you're then going to move into another loop of it. So I think if we remove it, it should feel like more of a fluid movement into the breakdown. Okay, that's pretty cool. There's a couple of things I want to try here. You can see how we've automated. We haven't actually automated it yet. We've just put on around about minus 20 dB of the effects return going to the concert hall here. What I'm going to do is just very subtly ramp that up to about minus 14, see how that works. And that should just intensify the reverb effects a little bit and create even more of a washing sensibility as we move over into the drop. The other thing I'm going to look at is possibly putting on a touch of our ping pong delay, but just on these two vocal samples here. Let's listen to them on their own. And with the ping pong delay. And I'm not going to put it on that first note because then the two samples get a little bit jumbled up in the effects tail. But I like that. That's just going to kind of echo over the break, again smoothing out that obvious change. Let's give it a listen rolling into the break. Now that for me is starting to work really well. It's almost like those reverb tails, those delay tails, some of the little sweeps that we put in, the reverse sweep. It almost feels as if they're forming this kind of wall of sound, the shimmering wall of sound, where the samples are actually blending with one another to create something almost orchestral, just very big and shimmering. So we're just going to add a little bit of that vinyl noise in there. I can see that running pretty much throughout the track, just giving that touch of like underlying atmosphere.